Gentlemen, the most dangerous aspect of female infidelity isn't the physical betrayal itself. It's the sophisticated emotional logic system she constructs to transform deliberate betrayal into justified response to your failures, making herself the victim of circumstances that required her to seek elsewhere what you failed to provide. When a woman justifies her affair through emotional logic, she's not acknowledging wrongdoing and making excuses. She's genuinely convincing herself that her infidelity was an inevitable consequence of relationship dynamics you created, ensuring she experiences minimal guilt while maximizing your responsibility for betrayal you didn't commit but will be blamed for anyway. Before we expose these justification patterns, hit subscribe and drop a comment if you've ever been blamed for an affair you didn't commit, told that her cheating was actually your fault because of ways you failed her. Your experience might help. Another man recognize how emotional logic transforms perpetrator into victim and victim into cause of his own betrayal. Justification 1. Emotional neglect narrative. You stopped making me feel loved. This justification involves her reframing normal relationship stability as emotional neglect that forced her to seek emotional connection elsewhere. She claims you stopped making her feel special, stopped putting in effort, or stopped showing her love the way you did early in the relationship. Her affair partner made her feel seen, appreciated, and valued in ways you no longer did, which means her infidelity was an understandable response to emotional abandonment you created through your complacency and neglect. The emotional logic works by equating normal relationship evolution with emotional neglect. Every relationship moves from intense honeymoon passion to comfortable, stable partnership, but she characterizes this natural progression as you stopping caring rather than relationship maturing. You didn't actually neglect her, you just stopped performing constant romantic gestures that are unsustainable long-term, but she's reframed sustainable partnership as neglect that justified seeking intensity elsewhere. She'll point to specific examples of ways you failed to make her feel loved. You stopped planning surprise dates, stopped leaving love notes, stopped compliment her constantly. These examples seem to prove her case that you stopped trying, but they actually just document normal relationship progression where daily partnership replaces constant courtship. She's comparing comfortable committed relationship to new affair relationship that's still in honeymoon intensity phase, then blaming you for not maintaining intensity that no long-term relationship sustains indefinitely. Notice whether her complaints about emotional neglect reflect actual withdrawal of affection or just normal evolution of relationship expressions. Did you actually stop showing love, or did you stop performing specific romantic gestures while maintaining steady affection through different means? Real emotional neglect involves withdrawal of care, attention, and affection across all domains, while her version of neglect often means you continued loving her, but expressed it through stable partnership rather than constant romantic performance. Watch for whether she acknowledges your expressions of love that don't fit her romantic ideal. Do you show love through acts of service, providing, protecting, or supporting her, but those expressions don't count because they're not romantic enough? If she's only counting specific types of love expression while ignoring others, she's selectively defining love to create neglect narrative that justifies betrayal. You weren't neglectful, you just weren't performing love in the specific theatrical way that a fair partner performs it in the temporary intensity of new relationship. Pay attention to whether her emotional needs were actually communicated before she sought affair, or only articulated after affair was discovered. Did she tell you she felt neglected and give you opportunity to address her concerns, or did you only learn about this supposed neglect when she needed justification for infidelity already committed? When emotional neglect is revealed only after affair discovery rather than before, it's retroactive justification rather than genuine unmet need she attempted to communicate and address within relationship. The long-term impact is you accepting responsibility for her affair because you believe you failed to meet emotional needs she never clearly communicated until she needed justification for betrayal. You're convinced that her infidelity was response to your neglect, rather than choice she made independently, which means you'll spend years trying to be more emotionally expressive and romantically performative to prevent future betrayal. Never. Recognizing that no amount of effort will satisfy someone who uses normal relationship evolution as justification for seeking novelty elsewhere, whenever comfortable partnership feels less exciting than new affair intensity. Justification 2, discovery narrative. He helped me find myself again. This justification involves her characterizing the affair partner as someone who helped her rediscover parts of herself that were lost or suppressed in your relationship. He appreciates her in ways you don't, understands her in ways you can't, or connects with aspects of her personality that you never valued. Her affair wasn't betrayal. It was self-discovery, facilitated by someone who saw her true self when you only saw a limited version that fit your preferences and expectations. The emotional logic works by blaming you for her decision to suppress aspects of herself rather than acknowledging she made choices about how to present herself in your relationship. You didn't force her to hide parts of her personality. She chose what to share and what to withhold, but she's rewritten that history to position you as restrictive force that required a fair partner to liberate her from constraints you supposedly imposed through your failure to appreciate her completely. She'll describe how the affair partner shares interests you don't value, appreciates qualities you don't notice, or engages with aspects of her personality you never cared about. These comparisons seem to prove you were limiting her, but they actually reveal that she chose someone different from you and is now blaming you for being who you are rather than who he is. You didn't suppress her interests. You just have different interests, but she's reframed compatibility differences as your failure to support her authentic self. Notice whether the lost parts of herself she discovered through a fair partner were actually suppressed in your relationship or just aspects she never shared with you. Did you actively discourage her interests, or did she never mention them until a fair partner shared those interests? Real suppression involves active discouragement of authentic expression, while her version often means you didn't proactively discover and validate interests she never revealed to you. Watch for whether she takes any responsibility for choosing not to share aspects of herself, or blames you entirely for not knowing things she never told you. Does she acknowledge that she could have been more open about her interests and personality? Or does she position you as person who should have magically known and validated parts of herself she actively concealed? If all responsibility for her authentic expression falls on you, discovering what she hid, rather than her revealing what she wanted known, she's avoiding accountability for her own communication choices. Pay attention to whether the discovery narrative includes ways a fair partner is actually worse fit than you, but gets credited with superiority because he's new and exciting. Does she idealize a fair partner while ignoring ways he's less compatible, less stable, or less suitable long-term? When someone claims a fair partner helped them find themselves while ignoring practical ways that person is poor choice, the discovery narrative is infatuation, rationalization, rather than genuine self-actualization facilitated by better match. The long-term impact is you accepting blame for limiting her when you actually just had different interests and preferences that she chose not to share openly. You're convinced that you failed to appreciate her authentic self when actually she failed to reveal her authentic self and is now blaming you for not discovering what she hid. You'll spend years trying to be more validating and interested in everything about her, never recognizing that her discovery narrative was justification for affair rather than accurate assessment of relationship limitations that actually existed. Justification 3. Victim reversal. I was lonely in this relationship. This justification involves her positioning herself as victim of loneliness within the relationship that made a fair partner's attention feel like rescue rather than betrayal. She felt alone despite being partnered, isolated despite having you, and emotionally abandoned despite your physical presence. Her affair was response to unbearable loneliness you created by being emotionally unavailable, physically present but mentally absent, or there in body but not in spirit or connection. The emotional logic works by redefining any moment you weren't completely focused on her as abandonment that created loneliness, justifying external connection. You worked long hours to provide for your future, focused on practical responsibilities, or needed personal time to recharge, but she's characterized necessary adult independence as emotional abandonment that left her so desperately lonely that seeking a fair partner was survival mechanism rather than choice to betray established commitment. She'll describe feeling invisible in your presence, talking to you without being heard, or existing next to someone who didn't really see her. These descriptions seem to document genuine relationship problems, but they often describe normal moments of independent focus that every functional adult experiences. You weren't making her invisible. You were existing as a separate person with your own thoughts and needs, but she's reframed healthy independence as relationship crime that justified seeking someone who would give her undivided attention. Notice whether her loneliness complaints reflect actual consistent unavailability or selective focus on moments you were occupied with necessary responsibilities. Were you actually absent and unavailable most of the time, or were you engaged and present overall, but sometimes focused on work, hobbies, or personal needs? Real abandonment involves consistent unavailability and disengagement, while her version often means you weren't available every single moment, which no sustainable relationship provides. Watch for whether she acknowledges her own responsibility for addressing loneliness within relationship before seeking external solution. Did she communicate feeling lonely and ask for more quality time, or did she experience loneliness silently and then use unexpressed feelings as justification for affair? When loneliness is revealed only after affair discovery, rather than communicated during relationship, it's retroactive justification rather than genuine, unaddressed need she attempted to resolve through honest conversation. Pay attention to whether her loneliness narrative includes acknowledgement that a fair partner is available because relationship is new and not yet burdened by life responsibilities, or whether she compares your sustainable partnership to his temporarily unlimited availability as though it's permanent difference. Does she recognize that a fair partner seems constantly available because a fair relationship hasn't yet accumulated responsibilities, bills, career demands, and life stresses that require divided attention? If she's comparing your realistically divided attention to his temporarily undivided attention without acknowledging sustainability differences, she's using unfair comparison to justify betrayal. The long-term impact is you accepting responsibility for loneliness she experienced but never communicated, believing you abandoned her emotionally when you were actually just managing normal life responsibilities while maintaining committed partnership. You're convinced that her affair was response to unbearable isolation you created, rather than choice she made to prioritize excitement with someone new over addressing concerns with someone established. You'll spend years trying to be more constantly available and attentive, never recognizing that no sustainable long-term relationship provides constant undivided attention, and her loneliness narrative was justification for seeking novelty rather than accurate assessment of relationship deprivation. Justification 4. Growth incompatibility. We're growing in different directions. This justification involves her characterizing normal individual development as relationship incompatibility that made connecting with a fair partner inevitable rather than unfaithful. She's evolved, changed, and grown as person, but you've stayed the same, refused to grow, or developed in directions incompatible with who she's becoming. Her affair partner matches who she is now, while you represent who she used to be, which means the affair reflects natural progression toward appropriate match rather than betrayal of existing commitment. The emotional logic works by positioning personal growth as requiring relationship abandonment rather than relationship evolution. Every individual changes and develops throughout life, but healthy couples grow together by adapting to each other's evolution. She's reframed normal personal development as incompatibility that necessitated finding someone who matches her current self, avoiding responsibility for choosing to abandon relationship rather than inviting you into her growth process and allowing relationship to evolve alongside personal changes. She'll describe ways she's changed that you haven't matched. She's become more ambitious while you're comfortable with current status. She's developed new interests you don't share, or she's evolved perspectives that you haven't adopted. These differences seem to prove fundamental incompatibility, but they actually just document normal differentiation that happens in all long-term relationships where two separate people continue developing as individuals. She's demanding that you grow in identical directions rather than accepting that compatible people can grow differently while remaining compatible. Notice whether her growth narrative includes appreciation for ways you've also grown or only focuses on ways you've supposedly remained stagnant. Has she acknowledged your personal development, or does her story require you to be an unchanging obstacle to her evolution? Real growth incompatibility involves both people developing in genuinely incompatible directions, while her version often requires positioning you a static person who refused to match her specific growth trajectory. Watch for whether she communicated her changing needs and interests during her growth process, or revealed them only after a flaw was discovered. Did she share her evolving self with you and give you opportunity to engage with who she was becoming? Or did she develop secretly and then blame you for not engaging with changes you weren't informed about? When growth incompatibility is revealed only after a flaw rather than communicated during, it's retroactive justification rather than genuine relationship evolution that you both failed to navigate together. Pay attention to whether her growth narrative includes acknowledgement that a fair partner seems compatible because relationship is new, or whether she assumes current compatibility will remain permanent. Does she recognize that a fair partner matches who she is now, but hasn't been tested through years of continued growth and change? If she's comparing years of evolved relationship with you to brand new relationship with a fair partner, without acknowledging that new relationships always feel more compatible before growth differences emerge, she's using unfair comparison based on relationship stage differences rather than actual compatibility assessment. The long-term impact is you accepting blame for relationship incompatibility caused by her growth when actually she chose to grow away from relationship rather than grow within it. You're convinced that you failed to evolve alongside her when actually she failed to include you in her evolution, and then blamed you for not matching changes you weren't invited to understand or engage with. You'll spend years trying to predict and match her changing interests and perspectives, never recognizing that her growth incompatibility narrative was justification for pursuing a fair partner rather than honest assessment of relationship that could have evolved if she'd been willing to invest in evolution rather than abandonment. Justification 5 needs hierarchy. He gives me what you can't. This justification involves her identifying specific needs that a fair partner fulfills that you supposedly can't provide, positioning these needs as fundamental requirements that justify seeking fulfillment outside committed relationship. He's more emotionally available, more sexually adventurous, more intellectually stimulating, or more aligned with specific aspects of what she needs. Her affair isn't betrayal. It's practical solution to your limitations, where she's getting from a fair partner what you're constitutionally unable to provide. The emotional logic works by characterizing your differences from a fair partner as inadequacies rather than just differences between two people who have different strengths. Every person has limitations, different communication styles, varying energy levels, and distinct personalities, but she's reframed normal human variation as your failure to meet needs that only a fair partner supposedly satisfies. She's positioned affair as filling gaps in your capability rather than acknowledging she chose someone different and is now blaming you for not being him. She'll create detailed comparisons of ways a fair partner exceeds you in specific domains. He's more communicative than you, more spontaneous than you, more attentive than you. These comparisons seem to document objective superiority, proving a fair was justified response to your deficiencies, but they actually reveal she's comparing your authentic self unfavorably to someone who's performing during honeymoon phase and hasn't yet revealed limitations that emerge in all relationships over time. She's treating temporary affair partner performance as permanent character trait while treating your authentic long-term self as permanent inadequacy. Notice whether the needs a fair partner supposedly fulfills were actually communicated to you as important before affair began. or whether these needs were identified only after affair provided justification opportunity. Did she tell you she needed more emotional availability, spontaneity, or intellectual stimulation and give you chance to address those needs? Or did you learn these were deal-breaking needs only when she needed explanation for why affair partner was necessary? When critical needs are revealed only after affair discovery, they're retroactive justifications rather than genuine communicated requirements you failed to meet despite understanding their importance. Watch for whether her needs assessment includes acknowledgement of areas where you exceed affair partner, or only focuses on domains where affair partner temporarily performs better. Does she mention ways you're more reliable, more committed, more financially stable, or more mature than affair partner? Or does comparison only include areas where he currently seems superior? If needs assessment selectively focuses only on affair partner's strengths while ignoring yours, she's creating biased case for affair justification rather than honest evaluation of complex humans who each have strengths and limitations. Pay attention to whether the needs she claims affair partner fulfills are actually being met, or whether she's projecting idealized qualities onto him because relationship is new. Does affair partner actually possess the superior qualities she attributes to him, or is she in infatuation phase where she's seeing idealized version rather than real person? Often the needs supposedly being met by affair partner are fantasies about who he is, rather than accurate assessments of sustained capability to meet needs over time under real relationship pressures. The long-term impact is you accepting that you're fundamentally inadequate and incapable of meeting her needs, believing that your limitations justified her seeking elsewhere, when actually she just found someone different and chose betrayal over honest conversation about needs. You're convinced you have deficiencies that required her to get needs met through affair, when actually you just have different strengths than affair partner, and she's compared you unfavorably to idealized version of someone she hasn't yet seen. Through realistic long-term lens, you'll spend years trying to become someone you're not to match, affair partner's temporary performance, never recognizing her needs. Hierarchy was justification tool rather than honest assessment of your genuine limitations. Justification 6. Accidental connection. It just happened, we didn't plan it. This justification involves her characterizing the affair as something that happened to her rather than something she chose to do, positioning infidelity as accidental, connection that emerged organically rather than deliberate betrayal involving countless intentional choices. She didn't mean for it to happen, didn't plan to cheat, and didn't intend to hurt you, but the connection with affair partner was so powerful, so natural, and so unexpected that resisting would have been denying authentic feelings that emerged, despite her best intentions to remain faithful. The emotional logic works by removing agency and responsibility from her infidelity through characterizing betrayal as involuntary response to overwhelming connection rather than series of deliberate choices to pursue, escalate, and maintain affair. Affairs don't just happen, they require choosing to spend time alone with someone, choosing to share intimate conversations, choosing to cross physical boundaries, and choosing to continue contact despite knowing it's betraying partner. She's reframed hundreds of conscious choices as single accidental happening that she's not responsible for because feelings were too strong to resist. She'll describe the affair as unexpected development that surprised her as much as you. They were just friends until suddenly they weren't. The connection intensified naturally without either of them intending romantic involvement or feelings, emerged that were too powerful to ignore despite her commitment to you. This narrative makes affair seem like inevitable force of nature rather than deliberate infidelity, positioning her as swept up in circumstances beyond her control, rather than active participant, making continuous choices to betray established relationship. Notice whether her accidental narrative includes acknowledgement of all the choices required to create and maintain affair, or whether she skips over decision points to focus on feelings that supposedly made those choices inevitable. Does she mention deciding to meet him alone, choosing to share personal information, selecting to continue contact after attraction emerged, or opting to escalate intimacy despite knowing it betrayed you. Real accidents happen once and get corrected. Affairs require ongoing choices that she's disguising as single, unavoidable happening. Watch for whether she describes any internal conflict or attempts to resist the affair before surrendering to it, or whether her accidental narrative skips straight to inevitability. Did she experience guilt? Question whether to continue, or attempt to maintain boundaries before ultimately failing? Or does her story suggest feelings emerged, an affair immediately followed without any resistance period? If accidental narrative includes no evidence of choosing to resist before surrendering, the affair was more intentional than she's admitting, because real accidents involve attempts to prevent or correct them. Pay attention to whether her description of powerful, unexpected connection includes any awareness that new relationships always feel more intense than established ones, or whether she treats intensity as evidence of special connection that justified betrayal. Does she acknowledge that affair partner seems uniquely compatible because relationship is new and hasn't yet been tested by time and stress? Or does she interpret temporary intensity as sign of destiny that made affair inevitable? If she's mistaking new relationship intensity for unique compatibility without recognizing its normal affair characteristic, she's using predictable infatuation experience as justification for choices she made rather than forces that happened to her. The long-term impact is you accepting that her affair was something that happened to her rather than something she did to you, believing she's victim of overwhelming feelings rather than perpetrator of deliberate betrayal involving countless choices to pursue, maintain, and protect a fair relationship. You're convinced that connection was so powerful she couldn't resist, when actually she simply chose not to resist normal attraction because affair excitement felt better than committed relationship responsibility. You'll struggle to hold her accountable because she's positioned herself as person swept up by uncontrollable forces, and you'll never get genuine acknowledgement of responsibility because her entire justification requires removing her agency from betrayal she actively chose across hundreds of decisions.